Thanks, Brian. So, Robert, I thought we would start with a State of the Union of the airline industry from you.
Okay.
And then why don't you weave in the real differences between JetBlue versus the other airlines out there as it relates to business versus leisure travel, as it relates to balance sheets, as it relates to capacity growth, age of the fleet, et cetera, et cetera.
Start at the beginning, start at the end. Take it, okay.
So you take it.
So first of all, Andrew, thank you for welcoming me here to the synagogue, and Brian, thanks for that nice warm welcome. As Brian mentioned, I'm an aviation junkie. Like Brian, I am the son of an aviation junkie, and I am the one in the family who actually luckily got to go pursue his aviation junkiehood. I was born in Far Rockaway, raised in the 5 towns like you and Lawrence, under the flight path. Claim to fame is the
They came right over.
right over the house, and I loved
the
every
JFK.
one, loved every one of them.
Yeah.
And,
Except the 77 crash one.
I didn't like that.
Right.
And,
Eastern Airlines, right?
Yeah, right on Rockaway Turnpike.
Right on
I
Rockaway
remember that.
Turnpike, yeah.
And the national protests, I remember, for against Concorde, which is blasphemous because I love that plane.
Yeah.
I flew that plane.
Yeah.
Were in my high school parking lot. So aviation's always been very, very special to me. But fast forward, after I was in Washington, David Neilman, the founder of JetBlue, he was a fascinating guy. He's a dear friend. I'm actually going to be with him this weekend. But he was all about customer service, and he had this philosophy way back in the 90s that said, why should you have to only get good customer service and pay a lot? Isn't there something in the middle? And I like to equate it to, Nordstrom's or Four Seasons. You could stay in Orlando, where I was this morning, at a Red Roof Inn for $39, and you can stay at a Four Seasons in Orlando for $1,539. They both have a bed, carpet, a room, a door, a sink, a toilet, but why are you staying at one for $1,500 more? And the answer really goes to what David's view was when he started the airline. And this, by the way, is the foundation to answer the question. And that is, it's what Maya Angelou said. She said, people will never remember what you did for them, what you said to them, but they'll always remember how they felt, how you made them feel.
Right.
And David's view was, it's all about customer service. It's all about customer service. Everything we do, every new hire, we teach them customer service all in. And, it's not always, there's that old saying, life's a bowl of cherries, sometimes you get the pits.
Yeah.
Sometimes
your bags end up in Pittsburgh and
your bags end up in the wrong place. There are delays, there's weather, there's mechanicals. And it's not always pretty. But if you have the right customer service attitude, I think that's what he founded the airline to do. He wanted people to feel that, for the most part, absent those anomalies, when you went to JetBlue, you got a fair fare, you got value. You felt like you do when you go to Costco. Like, I may have spent a lot, but wow, I got a lot. I feel good about it. I want to go back. I'm going to tell my friends to go back. And that really was the genesis of the airline 22 years ago. So this February 11th will be our 22nd anniversary. We have, in those 22 years, gone from one plane on day one that went from Buffalo to Kennedy to Lauderdale, and it all began there. And we're up to over 280 planes now. We're in over 100 cities and over 25 countries. We just started transatlantic to London, 2 airports in London, 2 flights a day and growing. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is it all comes back to customer service. What's allowed us to grow? It's not ads during the Super Bowl. It's not full-page New York Times ads. It's word of mouth. It's when you fly us or someone flies us, your neighbor flies us. Generally, they have a really good experience. All the attributes Brian talked about, and we can get into that, but they tell their friends, and they become loyal, and they prefer us, and they'll even pay a premium sometimes for that preference. And that's been the secret.
Tell us a little bit about the other guys emulating with the TVs also. The differences between the business and leisure mixes of the other airlines, the balance sheets. And at one point, you had the youngest fleet, and I'm not sure that's true anymore. And what that means.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff in that question.
Yeah.
And I'll start with imitation's the most sincere form of flattery.
Yes.
It's that way in life, and it's that way in business.
Yeah.
So when we started, think late 90s, 99 we got our first plane. It was actually next week in 1999 we got our first plane. And 2 months later we flew it in February 2000. Live television on an airplane.
It was a big deal.
There was no internet widespread. Cable TV even wasn't that widespread. You still had the antenna on your roof on the chimney and aimed
It
into
made
the
the
city.
time go by very quickly.
It did. And a lot of people saw their first CNN or HBO on a JetBlue flight.
Yeah.
They didn't have it at home.
Right.
And it didn't take long as technology evolved for other airlines to say, well, we're going to do that. Or we're going to have taped recordings. And, JetBlue was known right at the beginning, for snacks. They were cool, fun snacks, but someone walked around with a basket, put the basket in your face, and said, take what you want.
Right.
You want more? Take more.
Right.
It was novel. It was only on the margins, a cost issue. For soda, we gave you the whole can with the cup. We didn't just fill it and take the can back. Little things like that. But those are really easy to emulate.
Yeah.
And other businesses didn't just sit by and watch JetBlue take their market share, take their business, make wild profits. They reacted.
Right.
And they reacted by emulating us. And, personally, professionally, that's very flattering. But from a business perspective, it's alarming because you better come up with the next new rabbit out of the hat trick. And so what we've done over time, and these things happen in spurts, and this goes to the cost, but first it was 24 channels live TV on a 4.5-inch screen. Today, if you fly one of our new planes, everybody gets a 10-inch screen with a couple hundred channels live, a couple hundred movies canned, free 4G Wi-Fi, so broadband that's not degraded as more people sign on.
Not the Go-Go network anymore.
Not Go-Go, right. It doesn't aim down to cell towers.
Yeah, it goes
aims
up.
to
Yeah,
Viasat satellites.
right.
And multiple electrical plugs, things like that. To this day, I'm very proud that we've been able to maintain the most legroom in coach. So we don't have the youngest fleet anymore.
Right.
But we have the youngest renewed fleet, our entire mainstay fleet. We have 280 planes today, 283, and the entire fleet is just about finished going through a refresh, except the 190s that we're phasing out. So everything feels brand new. It's all got the newest seats, the biggest TVs, all the amenities. So those are huge investments. An airplane is anywhere from $50 to $100 million.
Yep.
They're very expensive to operate. By the way, that price does not include engines.
Yep.
You have to go buy the engines separately, I kid you not. And, other airlines, one of the things that I wanted to mention, because this goes to cost and balance sheets.
Yeah.
Since JetBlue's been around, there's been a lot of tectonic change in our industry. The first and most obvious being 9/11.
Yep.
The industry literally was shut down by the federal government for national security reasons that we all supported.
Yep.
At our offices in Queens, we were looking out the window at the Trade Center as those buildings fell.
Yep.
Many of our friends and business partners went down in those buildings, as so many did in this community. That impacted us. So the first thing we did, we put out notes to all of our customers. We did take out full-page ads in the New York Times in early October, telling people, when you're ready, we'll be here. We understand you might not be. We were the first ones, David Neilman, our founder, he went over to Israel and found out from El Al, who put the armor in your armored cockpit doors? Before this was a TSA mandate, before there was a TSA stood up, we went and individually found out how to do it and put them on our entire fleet.
Yeah. They don't allow kids in there anymore.
Nobody goes
with the
in
little
anymore.
wings and stuff.
No. That was something that really engendered goodwill with our customer base.
Yeah.
To say they care, they get it, they really do want us back, they're making it safe and secure.
Right.
And then from there, we've withstood other shocks. There was After 9/11, there was the Great Recession in '07. I'm sure your industry was tectonically moved. There was the recessions. There's been consolidation. When JetBlue started, there were about 20 airlines in America. Today, 4 airlines control 82% of the market. There's been mergers and bankruptcies and consolidation. So we've remained independent.
Right.
We have 5% of the market.
Right.
But from 20, we're down to, less than 7 or 8.
Right.
Major airlines, major
Right.
being $1 billion or
Right.
more. So, we've had to rely on one thing, and that is what's kept us true to our mission, and that is customer service. Anybody can buy new planes. Anyone can give you the whole can of soda. Anyone can go buy the live TV from the manufacturer. But that consistent customer service, glitches built in, I think is what's engendered us to our customers.
Talk about COVID comes and you guys now have a slightly different balance sheet than a
Yep.
lot of the other airlines in your favor.
Very fortunate.
Yeah. Why? And I guess it was good going in. And the leisure mix versus the business mix. And you still may go see the client and you still may go to a convention, but it's likely to be less than you used to.
Right.
And that business mix and the long-haul travel is a very important profit center to other airlines.
Absolutely.
Not to you guys as much.
Yeah, so
So best balance sheet, probably a greater leisure mix.
yeah, going into COVID, so pre-19, it was the best of times for airlines. Everybody was
Yeah,
flying high, so to
minty
speak.
money, yeah.
People love to travel. I think they still do. But JetBlue was known as a leisure airline. Think New York, Florida.
Right.
And then we expanded New York to the West Coast, and then we did New York to the Caribbean. Those are our, if you had to put us into 3 chunks, a third each,
Right.
that's it. Transcon, Florida, northeast of Florida, and the Caribbean.
Right.
We do really well in all of them, but what do they all have in common? They all are generally leisure. We
Leisure.
call it VFR, visiting friends and family,
Right.
friends and relatives, and we'll take a business customer.
Right.
People love us for business, but we don't go to all the business markets,
Right.
Especially here in New York. In Boston, if you have friends in Boston and talk to them, they will tell you JetBlue actually is the preferred business carrier. We do far more business as a percentage in Boston than in New York.
Boston to where?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Buffalo, Raleigh, Charlotte, all
But
up
not
and down.
international long haul.
No, not international long haul. That was never anything we did until
Right.
this summer. Frankly, we didn't have the aircraft to do it. Those
Right.
require a type of aircraft that can make it that far without a fuel stop.
Right.
We didn't own those.
Right.
Going into COVID, when the world shut off, so in 8 weeks, business went down, and think about this in any business you're in, business went down 97%. We went down to 1954 travel levels. JetBlue, out of its then 260 airplanes, parked over 170 in the desert. It was cheaper to park them and wrap them up in a dry setting than burn fuel and use them. But for the government support that we received, all of us, all airlines, none of us would exist today, which you can say good on Congress, they preserved the industry.
Although some
Yeah.
would have wanted some capacity out.
Yeah, and I think, capacity came out, it's interesting. Capacity came out by necessity because nobody was traveling.
Right.
And as capacity came back, Congress actually put in hooks that as much as we're grateful for the support we got, it actually made us fly everywhere we used to fly.
Right.
Or if we didn't, we had to make sure in careful antitrust protective ways with the US government, that if 3 airlines were serving Dubuque, not JetBlue, we don't serve Dubuque, but if 3 were, and they all wanted to pull out of Dubuque because nobody was flying, 1 had to.
Right.
So it actually, the money came with strings.
Right.
Compensation limits, stock warrants we had to give,
Yep.
cost cut,
Yep.
things like that.
And they viewed it as a vital industry, and
It was viewed as a public utility.
and you had to save it.
Yeah, it was like the electric company. You couldn't
Right.
let the electric company fail. Eventually, they knew, and we all did, God willing, the pandemic would pass or ease.
Right.
It may have, as you just alluded to in your question, some structural, fundamental changes that will forever alter the industry, that it may take a long 5-10 years to get back to. So, leisure travel domestically, pre this variant, is almost back. In
Correct.
some markets, it's actually back to where it was 2 years ago. International markets in the Caribbean, which is JetBlue's wheelhouse, and South America, mostly back. The fares aren't where we want them, but the traffic is mostly back. People are learning to adjust to passport requirements, COVID testing requirements, vaccine requirements, documentation requirements, things that seem shocking at first, but they're becoming the new normal, like
Right.
masks.
Right.
What's different for JetBlue is we didn't have these massive, very expensive to own and operate wide-body fleets that before COVID, we're going to 30 cities in Europe and 30 cities in Asia every day. And when times are good, that's a great business.
Right.
You're filling up business class seats up front for $5,000 or $10,000 each way.
Right.
But when that dries up like a light switch,
Yeah.
and you still own those planes and those high-paid crews,
Right.
and nobody's on them,
Right.
you have a real problem. So that's where JetBlue, being a mostly leisure airline, actually worked to our advantage.
So, just to come back
Your mic
to,
fell.
to stock prices and so forth.
Yeah.
When I really look at the industry, nobody's sort of, over 5 years, the stocks are the same price or lower. I know there's been hits. I know people are worried about business travel on a secular basis. But there used to be days where companies in airlines actually went bankrupt, Eastern, whatever, and competitors were eliminated. And then the strong actually took off. This time it was a little different.
Yeah.
Everyone's loaded with debt now.
So we entered JetBlue, that's the one I can speak about factually. We entered COVID with the second strongest balance sheet in the industry after Southwest. So Southwest had 40 years in a row of profits
Right.
from their founding till COVID.
Right.
Obviously that
You
ended.
see their cost numbers today, by the way?
I did not.
Okay. 10 to 12 CASM numbers.
Really?
Big number.
Yeah. I'll get to that.
We'll get to that cost number,
Yeah, no,
right.
I'm going to get to that in a second. But thank heavens we had a very conservative leadership team that, we were buying our aircraft with cash. We were paying off leases to own aircraft. We didn't know a pandemic was coming.
Right.
Thank heavens we did that. So when we entered COVID and all the income stopped, but none of your expenses stopped.
Right.
You still owe the manufacturer, the fuel,
Yep.
labor,
Yep.
leases.
Yep.
We had, even before the government helped us, the industry, JetBlue had this enormously untapped resource of aircraft, its fleet, that we owned, that we could go leverage. Take out a second mortgage on a home, very similar.
Right.
Most airlines didn't have that luxury. Most airlines were very, very in debt. Even the ones in the 06 to about 2010, 2011, every major airline, the 4 major airlines, and they were consolidating them, were in bankruptcy. They all eliminated their debts, but then they all, the way they spring back and they
Spring back,
pay
yeah.
their,
Yep.
they pay the piper, and they just were all in hawk. And we were very fortunate we didn't have that. And needless to say, if any Congress people are listening, we and the entire industry obviously are incredibly grateful that we were treated like a utility.
Right.
I should say for all of you out there that pay taxes, myself included, no government money went to our bottom lines. What the government did with its...
Keep the employees on.
Yeah, it was called the CARES Act, and what they did was recognizing the public utility of airlines and the necessity for our economic functioning to have airlines, was they said, you can't go out of business. We understand there's nobody flying, but you can't just close the doors because of that. So we're going to look back 1 year, they said, to 2019, and we're going to look from April to October What did you pay your people? What was your payroll cost? For JetBlue, that was $1.2 billion. We presented them paperwork, said, you wanted the number? You give us $1.2 billion, and we'll keep everybody employed. They took 24% off the top and said, you're only getting 76 cents on the dollar for what you need. And then, so for us, that was about $935 million. Then of the $935 million, they said 2/3 of it will be a grant to pass. You cannot keep any. We're going to audit you. It has to go straight from us to you to payroll. So whether people are working or not working, you have to pay them. And that way, when things come back, they'll be ready. The other third, about $250 million, came in the form of a loan that we had to take. It wasn't, you couldn't take it, you had to take it.
Yeah.
And we had to pay that loan back, which we did. And then there was a separate bucket of money, another $25 billion, that was loans. Do you want to borrow money from the federal government? JetBlue was eligible to borrow $1.2 billion. Because we had such phenomenal credit with those unencumbered assets I spoke about, we only drew down 10% and took $120 million. We have since paid all that back. So we're completely even with the government. And the thing I'm personally most proud of, and I can say this uniquely about JetBlue, no other airline can say this, JetBlue has a no furlough policy. This February will be 22 years we've been flying, or 21 years. No, 22 years. We've never furloughed anybody. 9/11, SARS, coronavirus, the recession. When times get tough, every other airline tells the last people who came in, you're the first ones out. You're just on furlough, tough.
Right.
Don't care about your college loan, don't care about your auto loan, don't care about the food on your kid's table. You're not working here, we need to save money. JetBlue's never furloughed, and even with COVID, we never laid off one person.
Who would you say, I don't want you to badmouth other airlines,
No.
but who would you say is in the exact opposite position? Big international exposure, a lot of debt now. I look at the American balance sheet, it's really interesting.
Well, so the answer to your question
Is it American?
I'm a little hesitant because it's public information.
Your partner.
Yeah, they are a new partner. I'll talk about in a second. But American went into this with the most debt on their books.
Yep.
And then since this, they have leveraged everything. So from what I read in the paper and in their reports, they are not in any danger of, having an issue. But they're the closest to having an issue.
Right.
What a lot of these airlines have done, and I give credit to American because they've done it the most aggressively, is they've said, we've got these great giant birds that used to fly to all these European and Asian destinations that are empty. Let's put them domestically. If there's a hot domestic market, New York or Miami to LA, let's fly wide bodies. We might not get the same fare we want, certainly won't make the same profit we used to make with 10 a day to London.
Right.
But it beats flying a 120-seat plane when we can fly a 320-seat plane and fill it.
Right.
So they've been doing that more aggressively than any other airline. And as you just alluded to, this past year, JetBlue entered into a very in-depth strategic partnership with American that in the 4 Northeast airports, so Boston, Kennedy, LaGuardia, or Newark, they are now our partner. We are their partner.
Which means what?
So for those of you who fly JetBlue or love JetBlue and wish you always want to say, why don't you fly to and fill in the blank? Or why don't you have more service to fill in the blank? The answer to that question is the word slots. So a slot, think back to our youth, if you went to the circus with your elementary school or you went to the planetarium, you needed a permission slip.
Yeah.
There are 3 airports in America, it used to be 4, where they were in such great demand that the US government, the FAA, for safety said, you can't all come. We're going to issue slots. So a slot is ostensibly what I just described. It's a permission slip from the FAA saying you can land and take off. And if you don't have a slot, you can't serve the airport. So those airports historically were Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark, and Washington National. Used to be Chicago too. American, like Delta and United, is fat with slots.
Yeah.
They have a ton of operations at these airports.
Yep.
The problem with American is they don't, if you read the public data and listen to their statements, they never really did well with their operations in New York compared to United and Delta. United and Delta had robust domestic networks that fed their wide-body long-haul networks. American didn't. They served their hubs from New York, and they also fed off the local market for the long haul. Conversely, as you alluded to earlier, JetBlue has a tremendous domestic network from New York, the largest, but we have virtually no long-haul international network outside of the Caribbean and South America. So our partnership, in essence, says the two airlines came together and said, American is giving us for use, not literally handing us, but letting us use their slots at Kennedy and LaGuardia in huge numbers to pick up and fly a lot of new domestic markets that JetBlue hadn't been in. San Antonio, Milwaukee, Kansas City, new places that we just had never served, plus more flights to places we did serve, like Boston. We just went from 6 to 16 flights a day at LaGuardia. So hourly service, we took over the shuttle. And in exchange for that, American customers get to buy an American ticket and get your American miles, which everyone's addicted to, but do it on a JetBlue flight, which we think is a customer service advantage, a better customer experience. And in exchange, we're sharing customers, all of the existing JetBlue customers in our domestic network, we can now feed to their growing international network at Kennedy. So everything they had pre-COVID, it's getting expanded. Tel Aviv, Delhi, Istanbul, new things are being expanded. And so the existing JetBlue network is going to feed that, and the former American networks that were domestic, we're picking up a lot of that flying. So it's...
Is it working, this partnership?
It is working off the charts, actually. So much...
For you, in favor of you guys or them?
Both.
Both.
So if you just looked at it on paper as an outsider who has more flights, you'd say, wow, JetBlue, you're going from 15 flights a day at LaGuardia, which you used to have before COVID, to close to between 50 and 60, tripling to quadrupling. Newark, 15 to 20 a day before COVID, close to 75 now. Kennedy, we're going to be at 225. So we're flying more, but it's with a mix of customers. We're sharing customers. It's only at those 4 airports. In other airports outside of the agreement, take Miami, which is a huge hub for American. Our focus city in Fort Lauderdale competes with them in Miami. We've never competed more vigorously. So we just launched our new Mint product, the premium lie flat first class product.
Right.
And we did 4 a day now from Miami to LA, head to head with their wide bodies. And it's going great for us. And it's lowering fares for everybody because they match our low fares. So where we're not in a partnership, we've never competed more vigorously. And it's something, honestly, it's one of the self-help, after the government did the CARES Act and the funding to keep us afloat, then it was, well, what's next? How are you going to evolve with COVID? How are you going to evolve with these new business models that say fewer conventions, fewer, I'll fly to LA for a 1-hour lunch, fewer of those things. How do you do different in the future to stay a viable, competitive business? For JetBlue, part of it is the NEA. Part of it is our network. We expanded our network drastically during COVID. And we just, we like equate it to throwing darts up against a wall and seeing what would stick. We just tried everything. Because remember, I'm in DC now, but all of you here in New York, this was the most locked down market, first and longest in the nation.
Yeah.
When New York was still frozen and its economy was still really on the heels, in the South, they didn't even believe it.
They didn't even believe in COVID back then.
I mean, they didn't understand it. They're watching the news and didn't understand New Yorkers. But that was, being based in New York, that hurt our business most. So we had to do new and exciting things like, Charleston to Los Angeles, West Palm Beach to Los Angeles, things we'd never done before. And a lot of them have worked, and they've stuck. Some didn't work, and we've pulled back.
Let me change the convo to, I don't know what percentage of your revenues is cargo?
0.
0?
Yep.
Why?
Almost 0. JetBlue used to do cargo, and sadly, it used to consist mostly of flowers and coffins. coffins and the
From
flowers
Florida
of-
back and forth.
Yeah, sadly. But because, remember we talked about the actual aircraft, JetBlue's fleet is a single aisle fleet.
Yep.
So that's
No room underneath there?
There's cargo down there. There's room for it, but not much. So it's one aisle, a single aisle plane versus a wide body with 2 aisles or 3 aisles. There's a lot more cargo space underneath. So a lot of the airlines that have those big planes now, if they're not using them domestically in places they're not meant to fly, but they're using them internationally for cargo.
I think you're gonna
with
start
supply-
seeing. I think you'll start seeing boxes on the
Yeah,
seats soon.
well, a lot of them are doing that.
Right.
But JetBlue's business model is just, we were in cargo for a while. We did U.S. mail, bodies, flowers in South America. And what we found was we didn't have the room, and there were some places we call it bulking out, where you literally had to stop taking stuff and tell people your suitcase on your vacation will come tomorrow on the next flight.
Right.
And that wasn't delivering the customer service that we were built on, so we got out of the business.
Right.
I mean, for the most part, we're out of the business. We do very, very little.
Yeah, but there are those that think that some of these long-haul flights with less business passengers are gonna try to make this up with cargo.
Well,
And that pricing will be stickier coming down than normally.
It is, and with the supply chain issues now, any lift is valued lift.
Right.
I remember as a kid going out to Montauk on the boat and seeing these trucks from Japan Airlines, and they would fill up with tuna,
Yeah.
drive 2 hours to Kennedy, put it
Yeah.
on a 14-hour flight, and 24 hours later sell fresh tuna in Tokyo.
Right.
So cargo's always been a big business, and now more than ever, it's just not something we can avail ourselves of.
Got it. What are you seeing in terms of pricing? I mean, you have a strange situation where the consumers got flush with cash from PPP and stimulus checks,
And being at home and not being able to go
and being
spend
at
it.
home and wanting to bust out
Yep.
and not caring about anything, and the markets were up. That's a whole nother conversation.
Pricing power is not what it was pre-COVID. So everybody has added back a lot of capacity. People domestically, absent this Omicron and Delta before that, absent those spikes of fear, valid fear, Americans are back to travel. It's part of our DNA. We like to do it.
Right.
But the fares are not where they were pre-COVID, or
Yep.
where they need to be for the industry to get back on a sound financial footing.
Right.
Now, for those of you traveling over Christmas, you might say, well, the fares I'm paying are plenty high.
Right, so you get spikes because
Yeah.
people need to get the hell
Yeah,
out of there, and then it drops
There's
off.
also basic supply and demand.
Right.
Everybody wants to go, and everyone wants to come back around school holidays. So
Right.
if you're one of them,
Right.
you're paying for that privilege.
Right.
But if you want to travel today,
Off season.
you can get a walk-up ticket from New York to most places in Florida for under $100. Walk-up today on almost any airline. That's not pricing power.
Right.
It's great for traveling, but it's not pricing power.
I mean, I guess at one point, looking at the stocks before they just came down again,
Yeah.
the enterprise values with the debt were actually at peak levels, and the profitability not even close.
No, not
Well,
even
how does that happen? Is that just stock
There-
market BS?
Yeah, it's a lot of people getting in and out of stocks short term, and that manipulates the price. It doesn't reflect the intrinsic value of
Right,
the
yeah,
enterprise.
okay.
I think most of I certainly can't speak for any other airline. I think certainly JetBlue, but most of the businesses operating as airlines today are sound financial models. But like I said, for all of the hits this industry has taken just in JetBlue's 22 years,
Right.
starting with 9/11 and the one we're in now,
Yeah.
I think you've all heard it in your businesses. This is the most unprecedented
Oh, yeah.
shocks we've ever had
Oh, yeah.
in modern American economic times, and it's going to take a little while. Everybody's evolving. Workforces are evolving. Labor shortages, supply shortages. You mentioned conventions, business meetings, everything is changing, and anyone that tells you how it's going to end and when it's going to end,
I don't know.
I'd walk away.
Right. I mean, there's a rubber band thesis that says after 2 years of Zooms and virtual things, when and if this thing ends and becomes the common cold, people are going to go crazy, and there's going to be in-person conventions. And then there's the business people like Europeans that are only going to come in once a year, not 3 times a year.
So we're about 2 months away from your 2-year hypothesis.
Right, I know.
It's around the corner.
I know, I understand.
I mean, China's at 2 years now.
Right.
Asia's at 2 years now.
Yeah.
Europe next month will be at 2 years.
Right.
And I think things will be fundamentally altered. New York's economy, I remember being once at a breakfast with Mayor Bloomberg, and he was so happy that New York had over 50 million annual visitors, most of them international, and they knew what they spent per day. They're not here.
Yeah.
And every time there's a spike and we put up new prophylactic measures about testing and vaccines and boosters and forms to fill out, they're going to be here less and less. And it's going to change entire economies. And I don't know about your business, but certainly at JetBlue, we're back at our headquarters, our corporate support center in Long Island City. We're back to 3 days a week mandatory.
In the office.
In the office.
3 days mandatory.
We had been
that's pretty
there.
strict.
Yeah, we had been there. It had backed down as variants hit. We finally got back to it. We're sticking with it for now.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah, they tend to be pretty light on Monday and Friday. But that's a real issue. When you think
I know.
about, maybe not for yourself or I, but when you think about younger people that need to learn what social interaction in an office place is.
Yeah. No,
what is it
training is an
like-
issue.
Yeah,
Camaraderie is an issue. I
Camaraderie,
mean, I had this conversation with an employee consultant, and
Yeah.
these young people are definitely missing that.
Well, they're missing it, but if it holds, even in part, think what that does to real estate in Manhattan. Think what the real estate then does to retail in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And then to housing in Manhattan.
Right.
And then the spillover. It's phenomenal to wonder what happens.
Yeah. I mean, even if price per square foot in retail holds, and it seems to be holding,
Right.
you can grow 50% with your employee base and never need more space.
Right.
So it seems like there'll be pricing power issues
Well,
in commercial real estate also.
We just announced during COVID, actually, we were remaining in a headquarters in Long Island City for we were staying. We were looking to move. And, as COVID and these new work habits and Zoom and Teams and FaceTime have taken off,
Yep.
it's really a fundamental question for us. We'll be here, but, how many of us will actually be in the building? And if it's
At the same time.
Yeah, and if it's worked for 2 years, that you can take it from home, and everyone's used to the occasional, I forgot to take myself off mute, or the kid is yelling, or the dog is kicking.
Yeah.
Everyone's sort of bought into that. A lot of people are finding it actually more efficient.
Well, they're happier not commuting. Some people think that commute was waste of time, and they get more work done the other way. So I get it. It's a quality of life issue.
Yeah, and I don't know how that will spill over to the airline sector.
Yeah.
But I'm glad most of our business is leisure and not based on business. Because at the end of the day, working from home or working in the office, your leisure life, you want to go away.
Yes.
And that's our wheelhouse.
Oh, you're not into the old what is it called? The meta universe real estate. You don't buy that into that one into that fraud, right?
We want people on JetBlue planes. And we want them on a beach somewhere that's not here.
Right. I saw an article about meta universe real estate grab. I'm like, this is such a bubble. This is such a bubble. It's unbelievable. Tell us, my final 2 things is, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Nicer lavatories? That can't be the next thing.
No. So
Nicer seats?
yeah, at the end of the day,
What?
I'll come back to that customer service thing and say, what differentiates JetBlue or any airline from the other one? We all have metal tubes. We all go 500 miles an hour. You have a seat, could be skinnier, wider, closer together, further apart, TV, your own TV. It's a fairly ubiquitous product. You know, Exxon, Shell.
You could call it a commodity product.
It is. I
Okay.
mean, and we have to find a way to differentiate that commodity, you know, and
Right.
we do it through customer service. So there's only but so much we can enhance it. We can do the next little thing, but the next big things, I think for an industry, obviously I don't know the answer. If I did,
You don't know the answer.
you know, but I think some of the areas where the answer could be are electric aviation, hydrogen aviation.
Away from jet fuel.
Yeah.
I've seen some private companies
It's-
already.
We're very big in sustainable aviation fuel. We actually are a founding investor in a company called Joby, which is a lead electric aircraft.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
it's never
Small
gonna
little thing right now.
it's never going to replace. This is not something you're going to put 100 people on,
Right.
or even 20 people on.
Yep.
But you'll put 4 to 6 in an
Right.
air taxi,
Right.
or in an air ambulance,
Right.
or in a short Uber hop,
Right.
where it's safe to do it and save a fortune. That technology, I think, will continue to expand. There is certainly, as we were talking about younger people in the workforce, there is certainly a societal demand for that sustainable type of energy and being a good corporate steward of the planet. We're trying to take a lead there. I think hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuels are just jet fuels, but instead of a carbon-based product of oil or shale or coal, they're corn stalk and feed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they still come from the ground and still produce, you know, an exhale and exhaust. Hydrogen actually is probably the most promising next quantum step for the industry. Boeing and Airbus both are putting a lot of money and science into it, and I've read people actually...
As opposed to lithium battery.
Yeah, the problem with electric is you have it with your phone. Batteries degrade, and they need to be a certain size
Yeah.
before they get recharged, whether
Right.
it's a Tesla or an iPhone.
Right. Right.
And you put batteries on an airplane.
They can go on fire too. That lithium
Well,
stuff.
they do occasionally.
Yeah.
And, you know, people do believe there's scalability in a future in hydrogen. So I think when you think what's the big next step, I think it'll be that. Because if they can do that at scale, forget the benefits of societal, you know, exhaust being reduced and
Yep.
carbon being reduced,
Right.
the cost will come down. And that will make, you know, air travel not just for this class, but for everybody.
And give us a little bit of. I mean, I would think, and I don't know if this is true, but in my experience, I've had more JetBlue flights canceled because crews
Yeah.
are timed out.
Yep. Yeah, it's a tough issue.
Almost, you know, any other airline. And I don't know if that's because you guys keep a tight crew or what that's all about. And then I've had a couple of flights. I won't even fly commercial anymore, but it takes an hour to get your bags out now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an airport problem or is that
No,
a labor issue in general?
It's a COVID issue. It wasn't this bad before COVID. So in general, to answer this, every flight has a different reason why it has a mistake
Right.
or less than flawless.
Right.
You have to know, whether it's JetBlue or American or anyone else, we're in business with a published schedule, and anytime we deviate from that published schedule,
There's going to be issues.
it hurts us.
Yeah. Right.
That plane is due somewhere else,
Right.
and if it's not somewhere else on time,
Right.
we suffer financially. So it's
Right.
not in our interest to ever see a delay for any reason.
Right. Of course.
But a lot of people don't get that. You know,
no.
they think, oh, you canceled it because it was light coming back. Never the case.
Right.
The light coming back goes on somewhere else that might be full. So
Right.
the plane is needed where it's
Right.
needed.
Right. Right.
The key issues that most other businesses don't have, we control very little of the flight experience other than what you as a customer see. We can't leave the gate till the federal government in the control tower says you have permission to push back. We can't turn on a taxiway and make a right turn to get to the runway till we have express permission to do so.
Right.
If there's 20 aircraft
Out of your
ahead
hands. Out of your hands.
Out
And
of
so
our
is the
hands.
weather.
If it's clear here and clear where we're going and everyone has a phone and can see it live,
Yep.
It's sunny out my window. It's sunny where I'm going to LA.
Yeah.
But if there's a line of thunderstorms
Yep.
in the middle,
Yep.
and the FAA, who we need permission from, says
Yep.
you cannot fly through that,
Yep.
you're sitting on the ground,
Yep.
we don't have a choice and say, well, we don't like what you're saying, FAA. We're going to go to NAV Canada and see if they'll take us.
Right.
If you're a U.S. airline flying in America, or
Right.
any airline,
Right.
you have to obey your instructions.
Right.
If you can't go, you can't
But it's always
go.
been like that.
It's always been like that. A lot of people left during COVID. A lot of people in this audience changed their lives. They retired, they went part-time, they moved, they gave up a career to try a second career. That big life decision.
So are you having hiring issues?
every
Is that
airline-
what everyone's having hiring
Every
issues?
airline is having staffing issues.
Right.
Airlines are like finely tuned machines.
Right.
When they're humming,
Right.
JetBlue pre-COVID had 1,000 flights a day. We went down to 40 after COVID at the bottom, from 1,000 to 40. But when things are going perfectly at 1,000, you have perfect staffing, you pay backup crews to sit and do nothing and be waiting for a crew to get
Time out.
stuck on a mechanical.
Right.
Yeah, and time out, like truckers have certain hours they can fly.
Yep. Yep.
Pilots can only work a certain number of hours over
Yep.
a certain period.
Yep.
Flight attendants, mechanics, everybody's regulated.
Right.
So when that bad line of weather comes through and everything's delayed and people time out, we put the company to bed between like midnight and 5 a.m. and basically hit the reset button. But when things today spill over 5, 6, 7, 8 hours into tomorrow, the only way to hit reset is to cancel a whole bunch of flights, tell those very unfortunate customers who were on those canceled flights, we're sorry, but we needed to put reset, so today's operation would work perfectly. We'll get you out on the next available, or we'll
Right.
refund you.
Right.
And that's a really hard message, but I think with labor shortages,
And you think the labor shortages are COVID, I'm making money at home, I'm trading crypto, I'm doing this.
until a few months ago, the federal government was paying 30 grand a year to sit and do nothing, and New York State was paying 27 on top of that.
For unemployment, super unemployment
Yeah, so
insurance,
you
all that
sit-
stuff,
sit at
right?
home,
All that
watch
stuff.
TV for nearly 60 grand a year tax-free.
Right.
I wouldn't want to go throw bags if someone was offering me that. And that's not just JetBlue, that's every
That's
airline.
everybody, I know.
Now that ended, so the labor market is starting to recalibrate itself.
Okay.
And the help wanted signs are beginning to be less plentiful,
Okay.
whether it's restaurants, JetBlue,
right,
American,
right.
or anywhere else.
Right.
So I would also remind you, this past summer, it's not an excuse, it's just reality. I'm in DC, but for those of you here in New York, July was the wettest summer in New York in 100 years. You may recall seeing on the news these floods in Newark, absolute, feet of rain. I was at the concert in Central Park, they got 9 inches of rain in like 3 hours. Unbelievable storms.
Yeah.
Airlines don't operate in that. Not because we don't want to, it's not safe and the FAA won't let us.
Yeah.
And again, when you go into day 2, there's only one thing you can do to reset the system. Push stop, cancel everything that didn't make it out, but start fresh the next day.
Right.
And somebody gets hurt in that as a consumer, and it's very unfortunate.
Right.
We wish it wasn't the case.
Yeah, look, it's just this nature of the beast.
Yeah, it's tough.
The labor inflation numbers that you guys are dealing with,
Very hard.
big numbers, right?
Where I live,
10, 12.
Well, McDonald's is starting at $19 an hour. I was driving to the airport yesterday, and UPS had an ad that they're out at Dulles Airport near me, starting at $25 an hour, plus 56 cents a mile. Basically, you go UPS, drive a truck over Christmas, you get an average $60,000 a year salary. It's very hard to compete with that, especially as a low-cost carrier like JetBlue. We don't have those $10,000 seats to Beijing or to Paris.
Right.
Our walk-up fares, the most expensive fares you'll buy on JetBlue might be $2,500, $3,000 for a lie flat seat. But that's a third of what the other guys normally charge.
Right, right.
So it's very, very challenging for us to stay low cost and low fare, which we're doing
With labor inflation
with
like that.
labor inflation.
Right.
We think, though, as COVID resets things and vaccines become ubiquitous, booster shots do, hospitalizations and death rates are coming down, even as the virus has spread and the mutations happen.
Sure.
The unemployment changes. I think the labor market going into next summer will be far more normalized. And I will say this, I can't speak for other carriers. I just this morning was in Orlando welcoming 200 new crew members to JetBlue. Every Wednesday, we welcome either 200 or 400 new hires. We sometimes, 400 is when we have double classes. And people say, it's pilots, it's flight attendants, it's airport workers. People say, why are you hiring so much? You know, it's not that busy. And we say we're doing it to be ahead of next summer.
I see.
So we are not going to allow some of the difficulties we and others face this summer to ever happen again. We'd rather overstaff and stock up now, train them, pay them have experience. So going into the busy heat of next summer, that's when everyone likes to travel, kids are out of school,
Yep.
we'll be more than staffed up for it.
Great.
It's an investment, but it's necessary.
Yeah. I understand. How we doing on time, guys? Are we at time? We're still good? All right, here's an interesting question. Given the volatile industry, whether it's terrorism, viruses, oil prices, labor issues, unions,
Sounds wonderful.
why would you ever invest in an airline stock? I know that this was going to be the final question.
Yeah. Sure it's not time yet? No. I'm not in your business, so I don't want to advise people on what stocks to buy.
Yeah.
But I think I'm reminded, if I can bring this full circle to how we started tonight, our founder, David Nealman, and I think back to how when I joined JetBlue, as Brian mentioned, I was the 6th person hired. David and his founding team, he didn't pick people by degrees, by, schools, their experience. He picked people by their passion.
Right.
He could train anybody to do anything. But if you had passion, he wanted you on the team. I think JetBlue, not uniquely, but more so than other carriers, certainly in leadership, at our support center in Long Island City, the 1,500 of us, these are really passionate, good people, smart people. And when you make an investment in any company, in any sector, you can look at the spreadsheets and look at the last quarter.
And I could see return on equities
Yeah,
and,
you can
and
see
return
all
on
that.
capital. Yep.
But there, I sit on a board. There's intrinsic things below that never show up,
I'm sure that's true.
and they're culture-based. Is there a toxic environment? Is there a recent consolidation in 3 different cultures fighting each other just under the surface, under what look like great numbers? Certainly with this industry, not uniquely only JetBlue, but there's a few of us that have really strong cultures, really historically tenured, consistently strong
Like a
cultures.
Southwest or something like that?
Southwest,
Right.
Alaska, JetBlue,
Right.
Hawaiian,
Right.
really strong companies.
And the stocks do better.
They do in the long run, and look, the other ones,
A little better.
but the other ones, when they do much better,
The numbers fly.
You look at their cycles, there's a bankruptcy in there somewhere where it falls off the cliff.
Right.
And resets,
Right.
and a lot of somebody's lost a whole lot.
Right.
So when you say, why would anyone invest? Some people are in it for the quick turn, but
Right.
the long-haul institutional investors, I think they invest in the teams of leaders, and those are the companies I just mentioned, I think consistently have had that.
Right.
And we've attracted that.
Great. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks.
How we gotten that? We're good now? Appreciate it.
Well,
Thank
thank you so much for
Rob.
having me.
Great
Thank
job.
you, Synagogue.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed everything. Learned a little bit about the airline business.
And I hope you all go away over Christmas and had a great Hanukkah and travel somewhere in an airplane.
And get a 3rd jab before you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.